Good morning, and welcome to sunny Montreal. You all must really like CORSIA, because we have a very important game this morning at 10 a.m., Brazil-Mexico, and we are all here in sunny Montreal talking about CORSIA. So thank you for your presence this morning, and I assure you, you will really love CORSIA even more when we finish tomorrow. So my name is Jane Hoopie. I'm the director in charge of the environmental program in ICAO. I'm deputy director of the Air Transport Bureau. And I am delighted to have in our opening ceremony today the president of the Council of ICAO, Dr. Olumuyiwa Bernard Aliu, and the director of the Air Transport Bureau, Mr. Boubacar Djibo. And for the opening, I would like to ask the President to please come join us at the podium. Mr. President.
Yeah, thank you, Jane. I'm pleased to see here today quite a number of distinguished representatives on the ICAO Council. I'm also pleased to welcome representatives of our member states and the industry and other stakeholders. Ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor to open this seminar on the carbon offsetting and reduction scheme for international aviation, and to welcome you all to Montreal. The agreement reached by ICAO member states on CORSIA at our 39th Assembly in October 2016 has been universally acclaimed as an historic landmark achievement towards combating climate change and a significant progress by the aviation sector in achieving the global aspirational goal of carbon neutral growth from 2020 onwards under the leadership of ICAO. Since that assembly, ICAO and our member states and the industry have been at work to make CORSIA a reality. I am therefore very pleased to inform you that the Council last week adopted the new standards and recommended practices, or SAPs, for the implementation of CORSIA as Volume 4 of Annex 16 to the Convention on International Civil Aviation. This important body of work outlines what has to be done by states and operators to implement CORSIA, including the monitoring, reporting, and verification requirements, which will need to be implemented 6 months from now, on 1st January 2019. In achieving this milestone, we must keep in mind that the development and adoption of international civil aviation SAPs is a process that usually takes about 5 years. The fact that these CORSIA SAPs have been produced on such an accelerated timeline should serve as a testament for all of us that the world sees this as a key climate change mitigation priority, and that a great deal of consensus has been achieved not only among states, but industry and other stakeholders as well. During the CORSIA SAPs consultation period, which is an integral part of the standards development process, ICAO received approximately 570 comments from 101 states and 4 international organizations. This was a record high and similarly exemplifies the level of global interest and concern which CORSIA is engendering. I would also like to draw your attention to the fact that in order to support their review process and increase confidence among member states in their suitability, the CORSIA SAPs were tested before their adoption. This testing was accomplished by means of a partnership between ICAO and the government of Germany, with the active contribution of 6 additional states, which included Burkina Faso, Canada, Japan, Kenya, Mexico, and the United Arab Emirates. The voluntary participation of 10 commercial airlines were also very instrumental to facilitating this testing process and validating the SAPs. In addition to the adoption of CORSIA SAPs, the recent session of the ICAO Council has made significant progress on 2 of the 5 CORSIA implementation elements. It approved the 2018 version of the ICAO CORSIA CO2 Estimation and Reporting Tool, or SART, as well as the functional requirements of the CORSIA Central Registry, CCR, and more on these topics will be discussed over the course of this seminar. Work on the remaining 3 implementation elements is ongoing. We clearly define timelines to ensure their completion before the application date. All of these accomplishments were made possible through the dedication and hard work of hundreds of experts from ICAO member states, the aviation industry stakeholders, environmental NGOs, and international and UN organizations that participate in the Committee on Aviation Environmental Protection, CAEP. These experts devoted countless hours to this process, and I wish to extend ICAO's gratitude and deep appreciation to all of them. I also would like to thank the Council members for their enormous efforts, good spirit of cooperation, and consensus building. Certainly, all of these qualities were instrumental to ICAO achieving this impressive accomplishment in such a short period of time. I wish to also extend my gratitude to the Secretary General, the Director of Air Transport Bureau, and other staff of the ICAO Secretariat for their efforts. In particular, I'm sure that most of you are already fully aware of how committed our Deputy Director of Environment, Jane Hupe, and our team are, and how much they have done to drive this truly global success. Dear colleagues, a lot has been accomplished, and we are proud of our achievements. But the ICAO Council still has a number of CORSIA items on its agenda, which you should all remain cognizant of. As a next step, its work will focus on ensuring that all other CORSIA implementation elements are put in place in a timely manner in order to ensure that states and operators have everything they need to implement all facets of CORSIA. This includes the development of a process to ensure that carbon market programs and projects can be evaluated against a robust set of criteria, a list of eligible emissions units for CORSIA, and the completion of ICAO's work on sustainable aviation fuels, including the development of life cycle emissions values, robust certification frameworks, and sustainability criteria. I also want to emphasize that this is only the beginning. The adoption of the CORSIA SAP signals the start of the implementation process. All participating states with operators performing international flights need to be ready to monitor fuel use and estimate their CO2 emissions as of 1st January 2019. Accordingly, states will need to put in place the necessary national policy and regulatory frameworks. This schedule is tight, but it is also doable. ICAO is already working to ensure that all states are ready, and we are facilitating the state preparedness further through capacity building and regional training events. In support of these efforts, ICAO will also unveil a new capacity building initiative centered around the concept of bodies partnerships during this seminar. Ladies and gentlemen, we all know that climate change is an urgent matter that requires resolute action. The impacts of climate change are becoming more and more evident, affecting a significant number of countries, but mainly the poorest and most vulnerable. By the way, I hope you enjoyed the heat outside. For many of these countries, international aviation is a vital lifeline, and one which contributes to local economic growth, access to humanitarian aid, and many other socio-economic benefits. Despite its relevance, we also need to remain mindful of the fact that CORSIA is a complementary tool, and one which has been designed to enhance the results being achieved through the basket of emissions mitigation measures, which the air transport sector has been pursuing for many years now. These other measures include the enhancement of air navigation efficiency, improvements in aircraft technology, and the use of sustainable aviation fuels. In this regard, our global air navigation plan is regularly being updated. The Council has also adopted an aircraft CO2 emission certification standard, the first of its kind for a global sector, as well as a long-term vision and policies to rapidly increase the use of sustainable aviation fuels. It is, however, important that over the coming years and decades, aviation must continue to explore and innovate even more solutions in order to meaningfully address the environmental footprint of international air travel. All technological and operational options need to be evaluated and pursued in this regard. Dear colleagues, as you already know, today is a public holiday in Canada, and I will congratulate our host state on the anniversary of the enactment of the Constitutional Act of 1867. Your presence here today illustrates to the world once again our collective commitment and the leadership of ICAO at the forefront of aviation environmental protection. With that in mind, I wish you all a very productive and highly successful seminar. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. President. And now I'd like to call to take the floor Mr. Boubacar Djibo, Director, Air Transport Bureau, for his opening remarks. Mr. Djibo, please.
Dear colleague, friends, council member, state representative, including I see somebody who was with us in council who is back in the room here. Welcome back. We are pleased to have you here and for that regional seminar on carbon offsetting and reduction scheme for international aviation. I think now CORSIA is officially embedded under Annex 16, Volume 4. So we are pleased to welcome you under the umbrella of CORSIA. Dr. Aliou already mentioned that really it's an historical moment for us. On Friday, the adoption of Annex 6, Volume 4, signaled the start of the implementation of CORSIA less than 2 years after its decision at the 39th session of the ICAO Assembly, which was held in the same building here in September, October of 2016. The prospect of CORSIA implementation is very impressive, and now the time has come to ensure that we are ready to the task. We have challenges, but we are confident that we will be able, through you, to meet those challenges. It's important, and we cannot emphasize strongly enough, the importance of ensuring that all states with aeroplane operators that perform international flights have the necessity, capacity, and means to implement CORSIA as of 1st January 2019. 1st January 2019, we are in July 2018, which means in a few months. It's important, and this is really why we are pleased to have you here in that global seminar. The Secretariat, and it was already mentioned by the President, by the Secretary General, Dr. Liu, stands ready to assist all states in the implementation of the scheme. And this seminar is the first capacity building after the adoption, which was last Friday. But it's not the first training event. It's not the event that you are attending. Most of the faces here attended one of the 5 regional seminars which are organized in March, April of this year in Guatemala, in Skopje, in South Africa, in Cairo, and in Australia. So we know that you came under those regional seminars, but here today we would like to listen to you, to coordinate with you in the global approach and specifically after the adoption of the annex. So the objective of this 2-day seminar is to further explain and train participants on the CORSIA requirements, with a specific focus on the monitoring, reporting, and verification of CO2 emissions from international flights. This will assist all of you and all of your staff or all your stakeholders to have a clear understanding of the MRV procedures and required action, as well as related responsibilities involved in the CORSIA implementation. After an introduction and overview of the CORSIA, the session of the seminar will focus on monitoring of CO2 emissions. You've seen the program. Then reporting and verifications of CO2 emissions and calculation of CO2 offsetting requirement. So it will be not easy to work here while we have the World Cup. We know it's a challenge, but we would like to draw your attention for those 2 days. In addition, 2 sessions will be held during which we will provide more information on the ICAO CORSIA CO2 estimation and reporting tool, CERT, you've heard of it in the regional seminars, and the CORSIA Central Registry, 2 of the building blocks required for CORSIA implementation. And here again, we only have a few months. The seminar will close with a session devoted to capacity building efforts, including a panel on partnerships to build capacity for the implementation of the CORSIA. We need the involvement of the state, of the organization, of the industry, to make it achievable for everybody. I wish also to inform you that an exhibition will accompany the seminar, showcasing a broad range of products and services related to CORSIA and carbon markets. And of course, we will encourage you, all of you, to visit the exhibitors' booths and to learn from them, to see their products, to see their knowledge, to see their documentation. And our event will be also live streamed through the ICAO website. So it's an important for others not being able to join us here to be able to follow. In closing, I would like to extend an invitation to all of you to attend the reception today, starting at 5:30 outside this meeting room. And during that reception, the ICAO Act CORSIA program, already referred to by the President of the Council, will be launched. This is the latest ICAO initiative to provide assistance, capacity building and training. And this is why we call it ACT, to be able to give us the possibility to act accordingly to the mandate of the Chicago Convention, to no country left behind, to the SDGs, but whatever comes and giving a perspective on how we can face the challenges linked to climate change. And of course, as you know, Mrs. Jane Upe will be in charge of the seminar for 2 days, so she will be pleased, of course, to brief you, to go through the first presentation and whatever is necessary to have that seminar being a success. Thank you for being with us, and have a nice stay of 2-day stays in Montreal. Thank you.
So we would like to thank the presence of the President and Boubacar for the opening ceremony. And on that note, let's give them a louder round of applause for their presence here today. We will continue now with the first session of the seminar. That would be a good time if you are not sitting comfortably for some reason, you didn't get a table yet. Just move around, get a table, sit wherever you want to be more comfortable. Is everybody okay? You don't need a table to see the seminar, it's fine. All right. So, as Boubacar just mentioned, what we are going to do in the first bit of the seminar is to make sure everybody that's in this room understands what CORSIA is and understands how we go about it. So, I will start with a very first overview. If it's your first time hearing about CORSIA or learning about CORSIA, don't get too impressed. There's a lot of terms, a lot of different features and the way the scheme is structured. But we will go following in the next sessions, one by one, explaining more in detail each one of the features, each one of the steps, and you all will have plenty of opportunity to ask questions. So for now, unless it's a big, overview or overarching question, hold your horses, wait for the next sessions, because we will be explaining step by step the CORSIA scheme, okay? So, first, just to put into context, we did have a very important assembly in 2010. And in 2010, we did agree in the Assembly for what we call the aspirational goals of ICAO. I always say, see guys, 2010 was when we really turned the page to sustainability. It's when we looked to aviation, said, where do we want to go? And we had these aspirational goals. Two of them are the 2020 carbon neutral growth from 2020, and the other one is that we keep getting better every year in terms of our performance by 2%. So those two goals were very important. But together with those two goals, we have put what we call the basket of measures. What is this? This is, well, you have these aspirational goals. How are you going to get there? So those are the means to get there. So we said basically we have 4 issues here that we can use to get there. And imagine we were in 2010, CORSIA didn't even exist as a term. We did have the clear view that we are going to have the technologies evolving, so we want our equipments to perform better. So our aircraft technology is something very important for us, for us. So since then we had issue a CO2 standard, so we are moving towards having better technology to respond to climate change. So less consumption of fuel in our aircraft, better models, better types are evolving. Every time we have a new type, it's another benchmark that we get into better technologies. On that note, I also have to say that we do have the committee that was mentioned by the President and by Boubacar. It's called Committee on Aviation and Environmental Protection. And that is the committee that deals with the technical issues regarding aviation and environment in ICAO. That committee has been there for a long time now. Before that committee, we had 2 other committees, one on noise, one on emissions, and then we put them together to create CAPE. And CAPE is where we discuss these technologies, we discuss where we are in terms of getting better, responding better to our environmental challenges. We have almost 600, and I'll repeat the number, 600 of the best experts on aviation and environment involved in the work of this committee. So it's not a simple thing we are talking about here. It's a very complex issue. We have to have expertise in various fields, and our states and international organizations come together to provide us those experts so that we can progress in all those issues that I'm talking about here. So, first one, technology. The second one is the way you operate your equipment, right? So operational measures, be it your aircraft, be it your airport, the way you operate and you facilitate a seamless operation influences on the amount of fuel that you are going to use as well. If you stay in your airspace, on a waiting pattern for hours, that's very bad for the environment. You're spending a lot of fuel that you do not need to spend. On the other hand, if before you leave your origin airport, you already have your entire trip monitored until you land in the other airport seamlessly, you don't stop ever. You go to the better altitude. You go with the flow, just optimizing your flight. You can save a lot of fuel. So we keep on monitoring and looking into those new possibilities to operate our aircraft on the best way possible to avoid the use of fuel that is not needed. The third point here is energy. So we are looking into means for us to have a better source of energy, an energy that uses or produces less CO2, or who knows, no CO2 in the future. Because what we want is really to reduce CO2. So we are looking in many different sources for fuels for aviation. And we want fuels that are sustainable, meaning that they will be better than the fuel that is our traditional fuel in aviation. So this is a big issue. We have thousands of flights that are already out there flying. And make no mistake, we are flying with used cook oil. We are flying with waste. We are flying with camelina. We are flying with sugarcane. We are flying with so many different feedstocks. And that's the beauty of it. Why? Because then you have a variety of feedstocks that you can use. We are getting a variety of technologies for us to use. And maybe you get to something that is with a good price, with very little environmental impact, and produces the energy that we want. You are now hearing about electric aircraft. We will have it very soon for small aircraft, not yet for our bigger airplanes, but for the small ones, for the regional, for small trajectories. We will have very soon our electric aircraft. So, you know, things are changing, and they are changing in each one of those elements. But then we come to the last one, which is the market-based measure. At the time that we, in 2010, when we devised these elements and the scheme, we said, well, we want something that is global. The problem that we have right now is that there is a lot of measures going around. They are not coordinated. They are making the travel very complicated, because if each one does it one way, you know, the airline, when it goes to A, has to know how is the process to report, what is the fee, what is it. It would be a nightmare. And industry said, no, that's not what we want. So we knew that we had that aspirational goal for 2020. And we were struggling to get there only with the three elements. So we said the following: we will get there for this aspirational goal, and whatever we do not achieve with the other three elements that I mentioned, we are going to cover with a global market-based measure. And we look into a lot of them, and then we decided on CORSIA. And we decided on CORSIA because after all the studies we did, this was the most cost-effective answer we had, and the simplest. Because our states didn't want something that was so complicated that, no, to do that, no. So the word simple came 1,000 times for us. So what we devised is something simple. Even if it looks a little bit complicated in the beginning, once you understand what we are doing, it's simple. And I will say that before we start. Fuel is close to 50% of the cost of the operation of an airline. Can be even more depending on the prices out there. Airlines monitor this fuel since the start. We have 100 years of commercial aviation. So we have 100 years of collecting and knowing the amount of fuel we have for an operation. States know how much fuel we are using on aviation. You, states, you collect taxes. You collect landing fees. You control the flights, you know, from where to where, when, what time. Your airports control those timings as well. We know how long we stayed in the patio, how long we were waiting for landing. We have all those numbers, and we have collecting them. You might not be organized, so good and so organized right now to put that number very simply in front of you. We will help you, because we will need those numbers for CORSIA. But we have already those numbers, and we have been doing that for 100 years. So what we are doing now, we are just organizing those numbers in a proper way, and, offsetting a part of it by buying units out there. That's what we are doing in CORSIA. So it is simple. And you will be bearing with us to see how simple it is. So basically, we have a few what we call design features on CORSIA that are very important. We have a phase implementations. We have 3 phases, and you'll see why. We decided on a route-based approach. That's very important. We only cover the emissions in CORSIA if the 2 ends are participating in CORSIA. If this state is participating in CORSIA and this state is participating in CORSIA, we cover that route. This state is not participating in CORSIA. The state is participating in CORSIA. We don't cover that route. Okay? Not, even worse, right? So it's only if it's yes and yes, then you cover that route. That is the route-based approach. Then we have a very specific way of calculating the offsetting requirements. There are exceptions on top of all of that. We took very good care of the new entrants so that, we are going to continue to evolve. There will be new airlines coming in. How do we deal with that? You will see, and it's fair enough. We have the technical exemptions. We don't want to burden, very small operators, very small activities. It doesn't make sense. It's more work. I think we have more CO2 emitted for the guy there to fill the forms than the real CO2 emission for the very little operation. So we put some exemptions to make it simple. Okay? So we have technical exemptions. And most important, guys, bear with me. We are all learning together. We are learning together with you. It's the first time we do that. So it's very important that we have what we call review mechanisms. And, we have already agreed that periodically we will be reviewing all of that to make sure we are doing it right. We want to do it right, okay? So we will be reviewing it to do it right. So, in the implementation, and that's the focus here today and tomorrow, is this monitoring, reporting, and verification. That is the first thing we have to do. We have to have our base, it's constructing a house, so the base has to be very solid. And that is the collection of all this information, so we all know that is there, and it's the legal framework, so we all know what we are engaging to, okay? So basically, those are the 3 phases that we have. The last phase, which is the second phase, is obligatory, and there is a participating criteria for that. Don't worry, RTK, those guys are going to explain that to you in detail. What is RTK, why, this or that, how do we do that if there is 295 and 05, but basically imagine that there is a list. So if it's a list of anything, the first one has 10, the second one has 8, list of bottles of water. So the first one has 10 bottles, the second has 5. The thing here is when we go to 90% of the list, that will be our coverage. But also, if someone has just this half-liter bottle, you're in as well, because half of a liter is already considered good enough. So it's one or the other. If you're 0.5, you come in. If you're inside this list up to 90%, you come in. Because maybe when we are adding, to get to the 90%, you need people that have a little bit less than 0.5, right? Then maybe the 0.4 will be covered in this 90%. That is why we have those 2 criteria, but we will explain again and again, very slowly, so that you will understand. And very important, we gave exemptions to least developed countries, to small islands, and to landlocked countries, landlocked developing countries. They are exempted. And for our complete, we were mesmerized on how many of those that were already exempted came forward and said, I do. Even if I am exempted, I want to participate in CORSIA. Some of them, because they are small island countries, and for those countries, climate change is one of the biggest threats that they have. So they said, anything that's an action for addressing climate change, we are in, even if we are exempted. And we will see that in detail. So this is the coverage, but I explained it quite well. Yes, yes, no, no, okay? This is a bit more complicated to understand in the beginning, but as a state, we to calculate then for the operator, you will have the operator's emissions in that year, and then there is this growth factor that is the difference between this year, last year, but don't worry with the growth factor, because on us, ICAO will be the one calculating the growth factor. So it's an easy calculation at the end. You just have to monitor yours, and we will give you the other term to multiply. That's how we are going to do it, okay? But we are going to explain the growth factor in detail so that you know how we will have to calculate that. Now, I also talked about the new entrant very briefly. We will explain also in detail, but there's two things that we will look into the new entrant. One, if it's, if this new entrant is really starting slowly, it will only come in on the third year. So you see, that's the case of airline A. They had emissions, they were starting slowly. So on the third year, they still did not have the second criteria, which is 0.1% of total CO2 emissions 2020. You see, it's only 0.8. So he only comes in on the third year. The second operator, B, he reached this 1%, he passed this 1% before the 3 years. So he comes in before the 3 years. So there is those two criteria to be fair to those that have been there since the beginning, etc., etc. So we will explain that again, but so that you see, we took care of new entrants, big discussions, and we got to this agreement. Now, I talked about the exemptions just very briefly. Those are the exemptions. So if it's a flight on humanitarian, medical, firefighting, we say, okay, guys, you're exempted. Then if it's an aircraft that's less than 5,700 kilos on maximum takeoff mass, it's exempted. And also, if you, at the end, emit less than 10,000 tons of CO2 per year, you're also exempted. Okay, so we have those three exemptions. There are technical exemptions. You remember I talked about exemptions by states. That's now exemptions on a technical basis. So we have a lot of exemptions. It's a very fair scheme, but we will see how it works. And then last but not least, the periodic review. You can see how many reviews we will be having as we go along. So we really want to make it right. And our council will be very active in looking into that to make sure if you find something that can be done better, that's what we want. We can do things better. Now, Jonas, if you help, there's a video that explains that, what I just said to you, but in a much better way. We'll just take a look at the video right now. Thank you.
As a UN specialized agency, the International Civil Aviation Organization, or ICAO, works together with its 192 member states, aviation industry, and other stakeholders to develop policies, internationally harmonized standards and recommended practices, and guidance in support of a safe, secure, and environmentally sustainable civil aviation sector. Environmental protection is one of the ICAO's strategic objectives, and its work contributes to 14 out of 17 UN Sustainable Development Goals and relevant supporting objectives. Following the October 2016 historic agreement by the ICAO Assembly on the Carbon Offsetting and Reduction Scheme for International Aviation, CORSIA, governments and the aviation industry are getting ready to implement the first ever sector-wide carbon offsetting program. Together with other mitigation measures such as operational improvements, aircraft technology, and use of sustainable aviation fuels, CORSIA will help achieve international aviation's aspirational goal of carbon-neutral growth from the year 2020. The priority for ICAO is to develop standards and guidance to enable its member states and airplane operators to report their international CO2 emissions starting January 1st, 2019. Therefore, the focus of this video is on the CORSIA monitoring, reporting, and verification, MRV, of these emissions to allow accurate calculation of the baseline and the offsetting requirements of individual airlines. The MRV starts with an emissions monitoring plan. It is highly recommended that each operator develop an emissions monitoring plan and to be approved by the respective state authority before the start of monitoring of CO2 emissions in 2019. Based on the emissions monitoring plan, every year the operator compiles the CO2 data and provides it to an accredited verification body. The verified data is reported to the state. The state then checks the reports and submits the relevant aggregated data to ICAO's CORSIA Central Registry System. ICAO consolidates the data, calculates and communicates the annual sectoral growth factor to states. This information will later be used by the states to determine the offsetting requirements for its operators for that year. There are 3 phases of CORSIA. The first 2 phases, from 2021 to 2026, are voluntary. They are followed by a mandatory phase from 2027 to 2035. CORSIA's implementation is structured on a route-based approach, where international flights between CORSIA participating states are subject to offsetting requirements. The average of the 2019 and 2020 CO2 emissions from international flights covered by the scheme defines the CORSIA baseline. The sector's increase of emissions every year from 2021 compared to the baseline will determine the offsetting requirements by individual operators each year. The benefit of using sustainable aviation fuels can be deducted from an operator's offsetting requirements. The combined offsetting requirements for 3 years will determine the number of CO2 emissions units required to be canceled to offset an airplane operator's emissions. Offsetting is the process through which a company or organization compensates for its carbon emissions by buying credits from the carbon market. Such credits are generated by projects that reduce carbon emissions from different sources. Following the finalization of CORSIA MRV rules, as a next step, ICAO will determine eligible emissions units which airlines can purchase to meet their offsetting requirements under CORSIA. Robust criteria and procedures for the assessment of CORSIA-eligible units will safeguard the environmental integrity of the scheme by ensuring that units are of high quality and come from reliable sources. The MRV process is conducted every year, while compliance to offsetting requirements is met every 3 years throughout each of the phases of CORSIA. ICAO, in partnership with governments and international organizations, will support all states with capacity building to ensure that they are ready to implement CORSIA. This includes the development of the ICAO CORSIA CO2 Estimation and Reporting Tool, CERT, which provides a simplified calculation methodology for MRV. The more states that decide to participate in the coverage of CORSIA offsetting requirements, the more emissions are covered by the scheme, securing the environmental integrity of the scheme. Even if a state does not have an airplane operator, the state's participation in the scheme will add those routes operated by foreign airplane operators by flying between the state and other participating states, thus increasing the overall emissions coverage of the scheme. Climate change is a global problem, which requires global solutions. The CORSIA is a global scheme for the international aviation industry. ICAO is doing what it does best, connecting the world by bringing people closer together while reducing its environmental impact and contributing to the sustainable future of our planet.
Thank you, John. So, now that you know everything about CORSIA, we can, I really just want to emphasize one more thing before I will pass to the next panel, which is this difference that you see on the screen. It's very important. There is a bit of confusion on who participates in CORSIA and the issue of reporting. So I don't want confusion. Everybody will report. Even if you are not participating in CORSIA, everybody will report. And there is a reason for that. It's because you might come in, and if you did not report, and if you did not collect all this information, you can't come in, because then we did not calculate. You know, it's difficult. It will be very difficult for any other states to join. So all states will report. We will know what's the basis, and then only those states participating in CORSIA will be doing the offsetting part. But all states will report. And that's important because at a minimum, all our states with the decision on CORSIA will have much better knowledge of their impact on the environment, of their CO2 emissions. As a minimum, we gave to all our states a plane level fuel for a knowledge on CO2 emissions from aviation. So it's very important, that part. We are now with one of the biggest challenges we have seen in our program, which is to make sure all states will be ready to report, start doing CORSIA on the 1st of January 2019. 1st of January 2019, all operators that are not exempted will have to start collecting that information. And we will have to have, by the 1st of January, the legal framework there. What's the legal framework? The legal framework is the regulations in the state now that the state needs to have to ask the operator to start communicating with the state. So states will have between now and 1st of January to prepare their legal framework, state legal framework, and we'll have to start talking to their airlines on how the airline is going to start collecting that information in January. Because for your airlines in your state, the airlines register in your state to start the collection of that information and start preparing the information to report to you, state. You have had to have talked to them before that to say how. How do you want that to be done? You know, next year you have to give me a cake. But what cake? You want chocolate cake? You want vanilla cake? You want a big cake? You want a small cake? What oven? What temperature in the oven we are going to use? All of those details have to be discussed with the airline before, you know, they start preparing the cake. Because in the middle of the way, they are preparing a beautiful chocolate cake for you. And you say, I'm allergic to chocolate. You should have done a strawberry one. You know, not okay. So that conversation has to take place before next year, okay? Now, this is my last slide, and I'm so pleased to show this slide. You can see how long we have come with CORSIA. And now I have to say and give you a little apologetic remark. You have seen the video, and the video was prepared before we had this very successful outcome last week on the adoption of CORSIA, on the agreement on the CERT. So some of the things in that video that says, we are preparing, we are doing, we did it, it's done. So we will make a new video very soon that said, we did it, it's done. You know, but for the time being, bear with me. In the same way, I have to say a few remarks on some of the leaflets we have, etc. So, in that process of approving our SARPs and all those elements, there were some decisions by the Council that changed a few features or a few issues from the original SARPs. Those decisions were taken, and bear with me, that was last week on Wednesday. We would not be able to prepare everything back again with the leaflets for today. So in our booth, you will see that we make a remark on what has changed from the leaflets. You can have them many ways, and it's good. For you to get the leaflet, you have to correct yourself what is changed. So you will be very familiar with the change as well. That will be good. But just remarks so that you know there were some developments. We will be talking about them. So some terminologies were changed, etc. We will be changing them from now onwards, and in the current versions we have, we will indicate to you where to change. In the presentations, we were able to change most of the time. If it's not the case, we will highlight to you, okay? And I think this is a very nice time for me to introduce to you those involved in the work on the environment team that will be making presentations to you as well. So you already met Jonas Lakia. It's one of our environmental officers for MBM. Tetsui, if you can stand up. Tetsui Tanaka is my chief climate change. Dr. Neil Dixon is my chief standards. Stelios, can you? So Stelios is, Spesmaglu is in charge of the registry, the central registry. Lorenzo, just stand up. And Lorenzo was very involved on the search. I have also Manuel Caballero, Bruno, if you can stand up, that are from the team, Stefan, Sean. Sean is the last one that joined us on carbon markets. And Manuel Caballero, that gentleman that was trying to sit, he was responsible for the writing of the SARPs. So, guys, a big round of applause to all of you. On that note, the next presenter could come. And Tetsui, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jane. Good morning, everybody. So my presentation is not yet going to so much detail on what's the features of the adapted Annex 16 Volume 4. You know, we are not yet, before the coffee break, not going to the detail. My presentation is some short overview of what this package is about. A lot of people, especially involved in the key process, may be already aware of that package. So package, normally people call package with something inside. That's we call package. So I'm going to give you what's inside this CORSIA package. Yeah, try to unpack the package. And it's so important. And you see this request from the Assembly 1 year and 8 months before. MRV. You hear a lot about this concept, monitoring, reporting, verification. And you already heard from the President, Dr. Liu, Jane, and Director about MRV is cornerstone. And we have to make it clear that CORSIA does not work by guess. You saw this trajectory of emission going upwards in the future. And we are trying to offset the emissions growth above the 2020 level. But we are not going to do offsetting based on estimated number by somebody. Everything is going to be based on reported, verified data, based on monitored fuel by airlines, based on monitoring plan. We are going to go into the detail. But that robust MRV is going to be the foundation upon which everything is going to be calculated. And this MRV is not only, you will hear later, not only about the CO2, but also this carbon credits. You will hear more like tomorrow. is also we have this reporting function, verified function. And you already noticed that Jane was very clear to avoid confusion. The MRV of CO2 emission, monitoring of the fuel is going to start from next year, 2019-20. At the same time, you had from 2021, there will be this carbon offsetting starts until this pilot phase, first phase, second phase, 2035. So how many years in total? From next year, 2019, starting checking the fuel until 2035. 17 years we are talking about. I don't know how old I'm going to be, but well, I hope still in ICAO. But 2035, the 17 years we are talking about, and that's what the council adopted last Wednesday. Annex 16 volume 4, of course, subject to the periodic review. Of course, that ICAO and CAPE always keep checking to see the further improvement of the design elements. But what basically agreed was 17 years. The reason I'm talking 17 years so important is that's why we need a package. Some new idea, try to make it happen. Traditional way of doing the business, I think in safety, security, I'm not 100% familiar with everything, but we have this famous 3 elements, ICAO policy, resolution. We have famous A393 on CORSIA, right? And we have Annex 16. We have already Volume 1 on noise, Volume 2 on local air quality emissions, Volume 3 on certification CO2 standard, adopted last year, 2017. And now, Volume 4 of Annex 16 on CORSIA was adopted last week. And ETM. ETM is the guidance on how to do it. Again, Volume 4. And those 2 things, SAPs and guidance, we hope to be published very soon. Now in editorial process, I think we are going to make it happen this month, July, this year, of course. But, and one more slide, the process to make it happen last Wednesday, I'm not gonna go through all detail, but again, historically challenging, very short time frame after the adoption of the resolution 2016 up to the adoption of SAPs, Annex 16 Volume 4 last week. And we have a remaining process to make it applicable 1st January 2019. Again, back to this package concept. I talked to you about these 2 things, SAPs and ETM. The traditional, like ICAO approach of having SAPs, necessary action by states and operator that they have to do, and the ETM, Environmental Technical Manual, it's more like on how exactly procedure-wise that the provision in SAPs needs to be followed. Then there is this number 3 you see on the screen. It's called the CORSIA implementation elements. That's something outside the box idea. And I believe this CORSIA element is something to do with the fact that this entire process of CORSIA implementation is quite long. From next year, 2019-20, but also going on and on, 2020, 23, 21, 22, 23. And we need different kind of actions by different stakeholders that we will elaborate later on in this seminar. Just excuse me. So before going to the 3rd element of the CORSIA implementation, let me just go through again back to the Annex 16 Volume 4. The first element in our package is the Annex 16 Volume 4. We have, this is exactly the structure of the Annex 16 Volume 4 that was adopted last week. And you will hear a series of presentations today, tomorrow, but the focus really will be on, you see the chapter 2 here, part 2, chapter 2, it says monitoring, reporting, and verification. And those 6 appendices are going to be explained very gently detailed. I mean, in a elaborated manner. I'm not going to go through everything, but you hear a lot of references to those chapters and sections in Annex 16, Volume 4. Again, the structure of ETM, Environment Technical Manual. At the end of each presentation later on, even before the lunchtime and after the lunchtime, today, tomorrow, end of presentation, you see already in the program, it says practical demonstration in your program. That's where you see some template even. The template embedded in the ETM is going to be showcased. You will see the presenter actually using those template on how to fill the emission monitoring plan, template how to fill the reporting template, how you can work together with airlines on how to fill and fulfill the requirements by using the template. So you see a lot of material from ETM to be used during the seminar. Finally, the last part of this package, implementation elements. So as I explained, this CORSIA, 17 years of scheme to be implemented, starting with MRB of CO2 emission. But at the same time, some of the information will be needed a bit later, not yet. For example, when it comes to the, you heard that from Jane's presentation, which countries are participating, will participate in the CORSIA or the offsetting requirements. The first year of offsetting is 2021. And before that, the 6 months before, actually, June 2020, actually next year, we need to know exactly how many member states are going to participate in offsetting requirements of the 2021. And on and on. 2021, we need to know who's going to participate in 2022. We hope the number is going up, but we don't know yet. Then we cannot put, for example, in the subs of what we still don't know. So that's one of the elements. And there are other elements. There are so variety of reasons that we realize in the member states and the CAPE experts especially realize that we need some new approach of not to document inside the SARPS or ETM, but it's so essential, very important information that we have to define, and the council have to be responsible for that. Then that's why that we have this approach of CORSIA implementation elements. Outside the box idea of SARPS and ETM, but it's so important. So there is one slide here. I'm not sure you can see the right side of the slide. Actually, this is one of the leaflet. Maybe it's a good time. I can. So if I'm not sure how many people already received outside the room, there's the ICAO booth. And there are this kind of 5 leaflets. Each one has 1 page, and there are 5 sets. You can take outside the room, maybe during the coffee break. And we called another document is a brochure. Brochure is something you can open up like this. It has a lot of action from next year, even this year, suggested recommendation. So we call it brochure, just to be on the same page of what we are calling different documentation. And the leaflets, there are 5 leaflets that you can reach out. I think a lot of people already paging, so I think most of people already have. But this is what you see on the right side is the first leaflet that we put together. And there are 5 implementation elements. Again, outside the SARPS and ETM, there are 5 elements. Number 1 is, it's called the CORSIA States for Chapter 3 state pairs. The reason for this name is because of the linkage to the SARPS. But this is exactly what I just talked about, the list of states. How many states are participating in the CORSIA offsetting requirement, which we still don't know yet. We are seeing that going up number, but we will see first next year, June, we will see how many states are participating in the offsetting requirements of 2021. And that information will be updated every year, again from 2020 onward. Second element, on the right side, it says SOT, ICAO CORSIA CO2 estimation reporting tool. So this is another reason, electronic tool, we cannot document the tool. But this is practical, very important, essential tool that the operator can use to estimate and report, put into the template for the purpose of the MRV. And this tool was just the first version, 2018 version of the SART was approved last week again by the council, and it will be updated next year, 2019, and there will be 2021 version. So this is another reason. One of the another reason of the implementation element be outside is the frequency of the updates. Some of the documents, like a list of states, and also the SART, they are going to be updated like regularly, like almost every year. It's not something like a cycle of the revision of the SAPs. So that's another reason that those elements are putting aside. But it's so important. So everything, even the modification, are subject to the approval of the ICAO Council. Third one in the implementation element, this is very crucial. It's called the CORSIA eligible fuels. So there was a last Wednesday decision of the council to call it CORSIA eligible fuels, to be somehow the source neutral. We have those renewable fuels, waste-derived fuel, also the possibility coming to the low-carbon aviation fuel based on even the fossil-based. So we still don't know, but as long as the different kinds of fuel meeting the criteria, sustainability criteria, it's going to be eligible. Eligible in terms of having life cycle emission reduction benefit to be claimed to reduce operators' offsetting requirements. We are going to have a specific presentation on this one, but the third element is very important, CORSIA eligible fuels, but still a lot of work needs to be done on this one. What does it mean, the sustainability criteria? What does it mean, life cycle CO2 reduction benefit? Who is going to certify such fuel? And how airline can claim the benefit for the purpose of using under CORSIA. So those work still needs to be done and be undertaken by experts group CAPE. And again, once those package, I should use package inside the package. This element, CORSIA eligible fuel, is designed, it's going to go to the consideration of council for approval. Fourth element, another important one, eligible units. What carbon credits airlines can use to fulfill the offsetting requirements. So again, there are a lot of work going on. The emission units criteria is something being tested now by the CAPE group. And there was a decision again last week by the council that please report back to the council next session in November to consider by the council of what's the next step to move forward for the discussion of the eligible units. What carbon credits that the airlines can buy and satisfy the offsetting requirements under CORSIA. Number 4. The last one is CCR, CORSIA Central Registry. We are going to have a specific presentation later on, but basically this registry is information repository to receive all information from member states and to do analysis, for example, of how to calculate the sectoral growth factor, and the number is going to go back to states to use. But what the council approved last week was the basic functionalities, the capability of central registry on what the CCR is going to do. And ICAO is moving on to have a procurement process of the CCR to make it operationalized. So far, target is to make the CCR central registry to be operationalized early 2020. That will be the timing that the member states will going to report to ICAO the first reporting of the emissions based on 2019 data. So we are on track, but the fifth one, CCR, is another important implementation element. So what I'm saying is that 5 implementation elements that are in front of you, those are kind of outside the box idea. There are various reasons I explained. Availability of those now, not yet, but we need for the future for implementation. 17 years of implementation. We need different timing and also different frequency of updates of those information. But all of them that I explained, the 5 implementation elements, they are all essential. Essential for the implementation of CORSIA. That's why that it's everything, even the modification, are going to be approved by the council before make them publicly available. So again, what I explained, the package is this leaflet that you can get. The first leaflet, the SAPs, the 3 elements in the, 3 components in the package. Annex 16 Volume 4, Environment Technical Manual, and ICAO CORSIA implementation elements. That's the 3 components in the package. It's called a CORSIA package. Thank you so much.
Excellent, Tsui. I think we will have a new presentation, and then we will open for questions on that first part of the meeting. Neil. You stay with us?
Good morning, everyone. As Jane introduced before, my name is Neil Dixon, Chief Environmental Standards. While we mentioned the World Cup before, it's still 0-0, actually. Brazil, Mexico. And happy Canada Day to everybody. So I'm going to present to you an overview of building upon the information Tetsuya and Jane have given to you so far. Details on the administrative procedures associated with CORSIA. Now, these are all documented within Annex 16, Volume 4, and particularly in Chapter 1 and Appendix 1 of Annex 16, Volume 4. So what I'll do, I'll specifically talk about the attribution of international flights to aeroplane operators, the attribution of airplane operators to a state, so how to attribute your flight to your operator and then your operator to the state. I'll talk about state administrative partnerships, record keeping, and then compliance periods and timelines. I think maybe I'm too tall for the microphone. Okay. So first things first, I think it's important to get some terminology out of the way. And so before I dive into those specific aspects of Annex 16 Volume 4, we'll talk a little bit about the purpose of attribution and what that means. So let's first explain the word attribution. So in very simple terms, attribution refers to assigning a flight to an operator and an operator to a state. So through attribution, it's possible to ensure that all international flights are captured. And of course, in that regard, all CO2 emissions are captured from international flights. Also, attribution helps avoid duplication by ensuring that each international flight is assigned to a single operator, and each operator is assigned to only one state. So, in terms of the definitions of a flight in CORSIA, of course, the SARPs define what is meant by a domestic flight and what's meant by an international flight. So domestic flight is an operation of an aircraft that takes off at an aerodrome of a state and lands in the aerodrome of the same state. Okay? A domestic flight is also one of those flights that takes off at an airport within a state and lands within the territory of the same state. So what we're interested in is, of course, international flights. Well, an international flight is an operation from an aircraft that takes off at an aerodrome shown here in state A and lands at an aerodrome of another state, shown here as state B. Flights from a state's territory to another state are also considered as international flights. And international flights are included in the scope of applicability of CORSIA. So building upon that, let's talk a little bit about the attribution of an international flight to an operator. So the first step, if you might. So the attribution of a specific international flight to an aeroplane operator shall be determined in Annex 16, Volume 4, based on information included in Item 7 of the flight plan. Those of you familiar with the flight plan will understand that very clearly. What we show on this slide is the ICAO model flight plan as detailed in ICAO Doc 4444, PANS ATM. So based on what's contained in that field, whether it's the ICAO designator or the registration mark, we can identify which international flight belongs to which operator. But you might see that clearly when an aeroplane operator or flight has not been identified through any of these methods, then we still have the ability to attribute a flight, and the aeroplane owner in this instance will be used. So this next slide shows something of a flow chart that shows how to do what I just detailed. So when Item 7 of the flight plan contains the ICAO designator, the flight shall be attributed to the airplane operator that's been assigned this designator. So you can follow the flight, the flow chart in this regard. When Item 7 of the flight plan contains the nationality or common mark, you can again follow this flow chart down, and you can end up as the flight attributed to the airplane operator. When neither of these things are true, then the airplane owner is used as the airplane operator. So the next step is, once you've attributed a flight to an operator, well then of course attributing an operator to a state. So the attribution of an airplane operator to a state is determined based on the ICAO designator, the air operator certificate, or the place of juridical registration. So what's written in the ICAO SARPs in this regard is that each state shall submit to ICAO a list of airplane operators. And these are the ones that are attributed to it. This list should be updated regularly, as and when it's needed, and ICAO will check the information submitted by all states. And states should use, as detailed here, states should use ICAO Doc 8585 to ensure the correct attribution of its airplane operators. And again, I'll show you a flowchart to build upon this concept. So if we consider how an airplane operator would be attributed to a state, we see here that if we have an ICAO designator, then it's straightforward. We can attribute the operator to the state. If we have an air operator certificate, instead the same is true, or we can use the juridical or natural person, so the legal entity in the particular state of operation. So there are other details in Annex 16, Volume 4. Of course, the work that was conducted on Annex 16, Volume 4 tried to take into all instances, so then all flights are attributed to operators, and all operators are attributed to states. So then there are instances where a subsidiary airplane operator may exist. And this is when the airplane operator with a wholly owned subsidiary that is legally registered in the same state. And this can be treated as a single consolidated aeroplane operator liable for compliance with the requirements of Annex 16, Volume 4. This is subject to the approval of the state. And in this regard, evidence shall be provided in the aeroplane operator's emissions monitoring plan, which we'll hear more about during this seminar, to demonstrate the subsidiary aeroplane operator is wholly owned. We also have details in the annex on administrative partnerships and processes. So a state may delegate the administrative process to another state, though an administrative partnership based on a bilateral agreement among the respective states. A state shall not delegate the enforcement of the requirements in Annex 16 in Volume 4. So it can delegate the administrative processes, but not the enforcement of the requirements, or the administrative task towards ICAO to another state. That is on each individual state. Continuing on administrative processes, a state providing capacity building support shall notify ICAO of this, about the contracting administration authority's scope and duration of the administrative partnerships, and should also provide a copy of the bilateral agreement between states. A state receiving the capacity support shall ensure that aeroplane operators are advised of the administrative arrangements, so then everybody understands what's going on in this regard prior to the start of the administrative partnerships, and any potential changes thereafter, of course. There are also details on record keeping in the annex, and it covers both operator and state. So for the operator, it states that records should be kept for a period of 10 years, with the recommendation that an aeroplane operator should keep records on its CO2 emissions per state pair during 2019 and 2020. So then actually it can conduct a cross-check of its offsetting requirements calculated by that state during the 2030 and 2035 periods. And then similarly for the state, should keep records relevant to those aeroplane operators that are under its purview, should record the CO2 emissions per state pair during the period of 2019 to 2020 in order to calculate the aeroplane operator's offsetting requirements. We've seen this, a similar slide to this a couple of times already this morning, so I won't labor the point. But Appendix 1 of Annex 16, Volume 4 provides details on all the timelines and summarizes all the administrative roles and responsibilities for the stakeholders involved in CORSIA. And in that regard, it covers the 5 3-year compliance periods starting in 2021. It also provides a list of activities and the associated dates by which activities should be completed. So in summary, what I aimed to do with this presentation was give you an overview of the administrative procedures associated with CORSIA, trying to build on some of the broader concepts given to you by Jane and Tetsuya earlier this morning. And in this regard, I gave you an overview of Chapter 1 and Appendix 1 of the newly adopted Annex 16, Volume 4. So now you understand how to distinguish between domestic and international flights, about attribution, whether it's the flight to the operator or the operator to the state, addressing the various administrative partnerships and issues of record keeping, and also defining the compliance periods, which are all contained in Appendix 1 to the annex. And with that, thank you for your attention.
Okay, thanks. Neil, come and join us. Take that from here. Now, it's your chance to ask a few questions. Again, more general ones, as we will go deeper into each one of those subjects, as we move along with the seminar. So if it's something on, oh, how do you calculate this or how you calculate it, we're still going to get there. But if you have a doubt that on the understanding of how some of the things work, etc., time is now. I will ask you just one thing. Identify yourself and first, and then ask your question. I don't know if you can use your mic or if you need to use the bigger one, but go ahead.
Good morning. Len Cormier, United Kingdom, Bermuda. The question I have relates to operators. You talked about establishing, a state would have to establish a list of operators. I'm assuming that you would not have to put in exempted operators, in other words, are below the 10,000 tons on that list or not?
So you will have to identify first, there will be a list of the operators that are registered to that state. And if they are exempted or not, there will be first one document that says list of states attributed for each, list of operators attributed to each state. So yes, you will be listed there. It doesn't mean that you will be offsetting, etc., etc. However, we want to know who is reporting to whom, because on the date that, let's say, you are now exempted, but suddenly you get very successful, you come in, we need to know who you'll be attributed to, and we also want to know, when we do our last check, if there is any doubt on, one operator being reported twice, or, if there is any misunderstanding on who reports to whom. So the list of operators attributed to each state, yes, will include all operators that are registered to that state. And then from there, it's a different, offsetting is a different story. Who's going to be reporting offsetting? That's a next step. Thank you. Again, guys, you have to identify yourself, and then I'll start with the gentleman.
Okay, Guido Harling from Germany. Let me preface my question with a comment that I'm a verifier under the European Emission Trading Scheme, and I have a two-folded question. The first part of it is, why were domestic flights excluded on purpose in CORSIA? And the second part of this question is, how does CORSIA plan to coexist with the European ETS, or when do these two systems merge?
So, first one, we don't have a mandate with national carriers. We do not deal with domestic aviation. This is the International Civil Aviation Organization. So it's international. That's your reply. On your second question, I don't know. The issue is we have put forward in ICAO a global system for international aviation. How that's going to coexist with the national systems, they will have to see how to do that. But this is the international, this is the scheme for international aviation, and that's what we do here. Sorry. Yes.
Yes, I'm a permanent alternate representative of Turkey. My name is Ibrahim. For attribution to a state of an operator, sometimes there are joint ventures, like we have with Germany, Lufthansa, and Turkish Airlines. How do you determine this? Which operator is the which state the operator is?
I will give my first answer. You guys can come and add something. So the way it's being devised is as follows. You have an operator that is registered to that state. Sometimes you have operators, for example, there is a curious case in South America with Amazon, and you have Amazon Brazil, you have Amazon, and they are registered with different operations in different states. So what is important for us is to clarify who is registered to what states on those operators. If you have an airlines that have different entities and is registered in different states, that has to be then clearly showcased. Okay, it's the state of registry, and if it's just one and there's operations that it's this state of registry. The important thing is when the state is doing the monitoring plan with that operator, that will be covered by that state, and it's clear to all states, okay, who is taking care of who and what operators are being taken care by whom. Anyone wants to?
I think if you refer to the presentation I gave, I tried to give an overview of what it means to attribute an aeroplane operator to a state, and gave the three. Jane really just alluded to them, but the three options of ICAO designated air operator certificate or place of juridical registration of the operator, and that stands clear in the rules of the SARP. So when one of those is triggered, it will be clear which state an aeroplane operator is attributed to.
Excuse me, you will compile a list?
So we will have a list of operators attributed to each state. That's the list that I mentioned to the other gentleman when he asked. Yes, we'll have a list. On top of that, we have the monitoring plans that will be agreed right now. And of course, I'm sure that one operator does not want to report more than once on the same flight elsewhere, because that will only double his offsetting requirements. So, however, we have to make clear that each one of those routes will be covered by someone. Go ahead.
Last question. If a country doesn't have an operator, you said it will have to still do something, but I didn't catch.
Okay, so that's a very interesting question. And if I don't have an operator, then you don't need to report, because you don't have an operator. Now, it's still interesting for that state to put together its legal framework, because you might have an operator in the future, so prepare yourself, number one. Number two, you still can participate in CORSIA, because while you participate in CORSIA, even if you don't have an operator, all flights flying to your state will be covered. You will not be reporting, but for example, let's say that Brazil will have a flight to Turkey. Okay? Let's say you have an amazing airline. So it's just an example. Let's say Turkey doesn't have an airline. Okay? Brazil has airline X. Okay? So airline X will fly from Brazil to Turkey. Let's say Brazil is in CORSIA and Turkey is not in CORSIA. Brazil wouldn't have to include that flight into the Brazilian one. But if Turkey, even if Turkey doesn't have an operator, joins CORSIA, then airline X would have to include that flight to CORSIA, to Turkey in there. So it will be covered. It's not the time for us to talk about the emissions units now, etc. But it is also something that we discuss a lot in the CORSIA discussions, that many states that will participate in CORSIA, even if they don't have an operator, they might also be interested to have projects in their states that operators flying to their states could consider in their offsetting scheme. So, for example, I'll give again the example of Airline X from Brazil is flying to Turkey. And Airline X takes a decision, a marketing decision, that to somehow making a nice gesture to those that fly Airline X from Turkey, we Operator X, will be investing and buying offsets from an important program in Turkey that is transforming coal into gas, or I don't know, something that would be with a nice benefit, or solar panels, or, you see? And that is possible. It's less obvious that an operator flying to a country that's not in CORSIA would like to have offsets in a country because this country already said that I'm not in CORSIA. But if that country, even without an operator, is in CORSIA, that is let's say, a possibility that we can see happening. Okay? Go ahead.
Sorry. So we are flying to many countries that won't be in CORSIA. So these routes will not be included in our offsetting requirements.
No.
Okay.
Again, guys, with me, big picture, 1920. Even those that are not in CORSIA are reporting. You will be reporting everything, right? A second thing is the offsetting part. You will not offset for everything. You will only offset yes, yes. Okay? Good. Gentleman here, and then I have someone there and someone there.
Thank you. My name is Christian Patrickson. I come from Chile, from carbon consultancy. Maybe I'm going to ask a question that will be answered later on during the day or maybe tomorrow. It refers to the registries. I know that ICAO and also CORSIA is outside of the Paris Agreement, right? And I would like to know how are you going to handle the communication between national registries in the context of the Paris Agreement and the offsets that you're going to that will be used in CORSIA, and also how are you going to handle as well these offsets in the context of international registries under the Paris Agreement? I refer most specifically to Article 6.2 and 6.4.
Yes, you are right. We are not in the Paris Agreement, so we don't have to be compatible with any international law on the domestic part. It is very important for us, nevertheless, the double counting, no double counting. And I'll ask you, please, to park your question, because I think it's a very good question, but it will I have a lot of eyes looking at me like, And before an explanation, nobody will even have the benefit of our answer. So I would prefer to have first the explanation, and then your question will make all the sense to the others as well, and then we have a more live discussion on that. So if it's a question, guys, again, of something that we did not cover yet, park your question, because we want to answer your question when everybody can profit from the answer, okay? Tops. So, who else wanted a question? The gentleman?
Thank you and good morning, everyone. Mahmoud Saleh, representative of Sudan to ICAO. I have about 3 questions. First question is about capacity building assistance. How it looks like, or what expected to looks like, and is this will be connected to the participation in CORSIA, or will be provided to any state has a desire to have help? Is there a training package associated with CORSIA through ICAO GATT office? And the last question is, in Sudan we have a project for reconstructing our airspace to be more direct routes which serve all operators operating in our country. Such a project, is it possible to produce illegal emission units that can make us a player in the trade or not? And the last question, please, if this presentation will be provided on the event website. Thank you very much.
So, guys, I'll have to repeat if we have not covered yet, and it is one of the themes that is upcoming. Wait a little bit more. So, capacity building is one of my fave subjects. But we will have 2 entire panels tomorrow on capacity building where we will have the chance to explain all of that. But yes, just for your first answer, yes, everybody will receive training, even if not yet in CORSIA. But please join CORSIA. The second question on the emissions units, I'll have to repeat the answer with the gentleman. We will get there. But there is something that everybody has to bear in mind. There is the issue of additionality. Okay? Additionality is a word for the environmental world, let's say, that says the following. If it's not business as usual, you are doing a project anyways, then no. But if you are not doing that project, or if you have advanced that project 5 years so that you could have more CO2 benefits, that additionality is taken into consideration and could be produced, a unit could be produced. But it's a little bit more complex than that, so it's not a yes-no to your last question. Let's wait for the panel on the emissions units, and then everybody will take the benefit of your question as well. So guys, if you have a question for an upcoming panel, don't ask. The gentleman there, please.
Yes, thank you. My name is Tom Fodor from IATA. My question, I think, relates to material that has been already present.
Good.
The 2 key documents that are critical for successful implementation of CORSIA is Annex 16, Volume 4, and the Environmental Technical Manual.
Yes.
What is the availability of those 2 documents?
Okay, so we now are working on the changes that we received from the Council last week, and I'll look to my left when we have them available. I'll put them in a hot seat, not me.
It's not something I can create, but we are targeting end of this month.
Yes.
But if I may, Jane, the answer to the previous question, the last question, I'm not sure how many people checked the website. We completely
We are
debunked.
live.
www.icao.int/CORSIA, all restructured, including all those provisions. I explained SARPs, ETM, implementation elements. Of course, some of them not yet approved by the council cannot be put in, but SARPs and ETM we're targeting this month.
Yeah, so for your question, we are aiming at the end of the month. Okay? Okay, time. Oh, I have one more, and then we are going to have a coffee, right? And I need to check the score of the game. I hope it's a good one. Yes.
Yeah. Good morning. My name is Chakravarti. I'm from DGCA India. When you say that we have to provide a list of operators having international operations, so as we know, we have 2 types of operators. One scheduled and one is non-scheduled. So scheduled operators have fixed routes to international flights. However, there are certain non-scheduled who sometimes they also do international chartered flights. So do we need to include those operators also into the list?
You have to include all your international flights that are not exempted. So those operators will have to be listed. After that is the same case, well, a similar case from the other gentleman. You might not need to report because it's below, but we don't know. So if it's registered to your state, you're going to list as your operator.
Okay. Thank you.
Coffee. Anybody score so far? Anybody know? 0-0. Okay, still okay. All right. Well, please keep us updated.